She sat down at the witness table, looked directly at the United States Senate, and said something that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. never expected anyone to say out loud, and the room went completely silent. Her name is Dr. Susan Monarez. 29 days earlier, she had been the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the most powerful public health position in the United States. 29 days. Then fired. The shortest CDC director tenure in the agency's entire history. But here's what nobody expected. RFK Jr. had already gone to Congress and explained exactly why he fired her. He had already told his version of the story, in front of senators, on the record, and what he said was the opposite of what she was about to tell them. Because one order, given in a private meeting, changed everything. To understand what happened in that room, you have to go back 2 weeks earlier. September 4th, 2025. Senate Finance Committee. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is at the witness table. Senator Bernie Sanders is staring at him across the room, and Senator Elizabeth Warren asks Kennedy a direct question. Did you fire the CDC director because she refused to change the childhood vaccine schedule? Kennedy said no. That wasn't the reason. He said the real reason was simple. He had sat down with Monarez and asked her one question. Are you a trustworthy person? And according to Kennedy, she said no. She admitted to his face that she was not trustworthy, so he asked her to resign. The committee sat with that for a moment, but RFK Jr. had already told his version, and it was completely different from what the evidence was about to show. Sanders had heard enough. He looked at Kennedy and held up the public record, Kennedy's own words from 2021, in which he had called the COVID vaccine the deadliest vaccine ever made. Sanders reminded him that President Trump himself had called the COVID vaccine one of the greatest achievements in medicine, that the entire medical community agreed with Trump on this. So who's right? Sanders asked, his voice rising. Is Trump and the medical community right? Or are you right? Kennedy could not give a straight answer. 2 weeks later, Dr. Monarez walked into the Senate Help Committee hearing room. Senator Bernie Sanders sat across from her as ranking member, and what she said in that room directly contradicted everything Kennedy had told Congress. To understand why her testimony hit the way it did, you need to understand what the CDC actually is. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention sets the vaccine guidelines that determine what shots American children receive. For decades, one principle has driven every decision: scientific evidence, not politics, not ideology, evidence. And that system was about to be used as a weapon. When RFK Jr. took control of HHS in early 2025, the changes started immediately. In June, he fired all 17 members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, the independent panel of medical experts that reviews evidence and recommends what vaccines Americans should get. Every single one of them gone. He replaced them with his own picks. Several of those new members had a public record of opposing vaccines. One of Kennedy's new additions was Aaron Siri, a trial lawyer who had spent his career suing vaccine manufacturers. Monarez testified that Kennedy had personally ordered her to meet with Siri. She refused that too. The pattern was already clear before the August meeting even happened. Then he told the new CDC director what was coming next. According to Dr. Monarez's Senate testimony, Kennedy called her into a meeting in late August 2025. He told her the childhood vaccine schedule would be changing, starting in September. He said she needed to be on board. And then he gave her a direct order she was to pre-approve every recommendation from the new committee, regardless of what the science said. She said no. He directed me to commit in advance to approving every ACIP recommendation, regardless of the scientific evidence, Monarez told senators. He also directed me to dismiss career officials responsible for vaccine policy without cause. She paused. Even under pressure, I could not replace evidence with ideology. Then she said the sentence that ended her career. I told the secretary that if he believed he could not trust me, he could fire me. 4 days later, fired. Sanders did not wait. Dr. Monarez was fired because she refused to act as a rubber stamp to implement Secretary Kennedy's dangerous agenda to substantially limit the use of safe and effective vaccines that would endanger the lives of the American people and people throughout the world. No one spoke. He kept going. It is absurd to have to say this in the year 2025, but vaccines are safe and effective. It is not just my view. It is the overwhelming consensus of the medical and scientific communities. Sitting beside Monarez was Dr. Deborah Oury, the CDC's former chief medical officer. She had not been fired. She had chosen to resign. and her testimony closed the remaining distance between what Kennedy had said and what was actually happening inside the agency. Secretary Kennedy censored CDC science, Oury told senators. He politicized our processes and stripped agency leaders of the ability to protect the health of the American people. Then she called on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to resign. But then something happened that nobody in that room expected. Senator Markwayne Mullin, a Republican from Oklahoma, leaned into his microphone and made a claim that stopped the entire hearing. He said the meeting between Kennedy and Monarez had been recorded. If a recording existed, it would settle every dispute. Kennedy's version against Monarez's version. The truth on tape. Senators looked at each other. Monarez sat still. The room held its breath. Then Mullin walked out of the hearing and told reporters he had been mistaken. There was no confirmed recording. He walked back the entire claim. The moment collapsed. But the question it left behind did not. Cassidy interrupted the hearing to address Mullin directly. He said that if a recording of that meeting existed, it needed to be released immediately, full stop. And then he added something that shifted the temperature in the room. He noted that his committee, a Republican-led committee, had already submitted a formal request to HHS for every document and communication related to the Monarez firing. A senator from Kennedy's own party was now raising the same concern as Bernie Sanders, and neither of them had received a single page in response. And then came the detail that changed the entire story. Chairman Bill Cassidy, a Republican senator, and a physician, had been taking careful notes, because in the days before this hearing, his committee had taken a formal step. The Senate Help Committee had submitted an official request to the Department of Health and Human Services. They asked for documents, communications, records, anything that explained how and why a confirmed CDC director had been removed after less than 1 month on the job. The committee had received nothing back. Not one document, not one email, not a single page. Sanders raised this directly. The committee with legal oversight authority over the CDC had asked for transparency. The department that publicly demanded radical transparency from American institutions had refused to provide it about its own decisions. Cassidy confirmed it on the record. The documents had been requested. The committee was still waiting. And then the documents never came. That silence told senators everything. Because it was not just about what Kennedy said or what Monarez said. It was about what was not being shown, what was being protected, what someone did not want on the record. Dr. Monarez looked at the committee and said the sentence that ended the hearing, "I could have kept the office, I could have kept the title, but I would have lost the one thing that cannot be replaced." She paused. My integrity. The next morning, Kennedy's hand-picked vaccine advisory panel convened in Atlanta. It was scheduled to vote on changes to the childhood vaccine schedule, including recommendations around the hepatitis B vaccine given to newborns. Monarez had told senators she was very nervous about what that panel would decide, because the CDC director who would approve or reject those recommendations was no longer a scientist who had refused to rubber stamp an agenda. That person was gone. The panel met the following morning in Atlanta. It voted to delay the hepatitis B vaccine, the shot given to newborns at birth since 1991 to prevent a deadly liver disease, from the day of birth to age 4 months for most children. Senator Cassidy called the change medically unjustified. Pediatricians warned it would leave infants vulnerable during the most critical window. The recommendation that Monarez had refused to pre-approve had now passed anyway, without her, exactly as planned. This was never just about one firing. It was about who controls the science, who decides what American children are told is safe, and whether the officials with authority over those decisions answer to evidence or to a political order given in a private meeting that may or may not have been recorded. Senator Sanders asked RFK Jr. a direct question. Kennedy could not answer it cleanly. Dr. Monarez refused a direct order. She was terminated for it. The Senate committee asked for the documents. They never arrived, and the shortest-serving CDC director in American history walked out of that hearing room, having said something on the record that no one could take back. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. told Congress she admitted to being untrustworthy. She walked in, she told the country what actually happened. The room made its own decision about who to believe.